Hello everyone, Jaffinator here, and welcome back to another Expedition 33 video. While I was working on my next project, Samfall dropped a major content update to the game, adding new zones, super bosses, weapons, Pictos, and my most requested feature. I've spent the past couple weeks exploring the DLC, getting the new equipment, and beating every super boss, even Divergent Simon. But since it's still relatively fresh, I wanted to make a guide video explaining my endgame team and builds. So with that said, let's get into it. Starting off, I should probably mention this update made me go back to using a full team as opposed to going solo. This is because Samfall both fixed the Notorious 4 and Gen buff, as I discussed in my first math video. And my L's damage with my previous setup absolutely tanked as a result. And since I now have 3 characters to talk about, let's start with the one who got arguably the biggest glow up, Lune. The topic of my solo run, Lune got a serious buff in this update thanks to her new weapons. While each character gets multiple new weapons, there are some that either have niche use cases or just straight up bad. However, all 3 of Lune's weapons are insanely busted. Bonbim is an alternative to Coralum, having the same burn on crit effect and dealing increased damage when consuming a lightning stain. Given how good Coralum was, it's a no-brainer that this weapon is pretty good. But then there's Eschium, seemingly the fan-favorite weapon of this update. Eschium is notable for its level 10 and 20 passives, which completely removes the RNG component of her other 2 Darkstain weapons, at the cost of needing an extra setup turn for a base attack. This weapon grants Lune her highest damage potential, but I frankly don't prefer it due to that extra turn of setup. But my favorite weapon introduced in this update is the Clayum, gotten from beating Clea Unleashed in the Endless Tower, which allows Lune to pierce elemental affinities, deal double damage after using Elemental Trick, but most impressive of all, gives her Simoso's Ethereal Sword, meaning skills like Elemental Genesis now do 16 hits total. But what if I told you this can go even further? The new Picto Gradient Overcharge drains the Gradient bar if it's full, but also doubles the damage of your next attack in the process. And CL's Fortune's Fury can also stack, which adds another double damage increase. If this stacks multiplicatively, which I think it does, all of her skills now deal octuple damage under these conditions, while also gaining that same extra hit. To put that in perspective, this is enough to put a serious dent into the Chromatic Aberration, a boss who is notorious for being extremely tanky. And keep in mind, this is on New Game Plus 3 with 20 times HP. In short, Lune is now capable of receiving the highest independent multipliers of any character in the game, and can decimate anything in her path. As for Pictos and skills, all the characters I have use Pictos that give a speed bonus, since having more speed makes you go more often. What you have here doesn't really matter, but for Lune, an absolute must is the new AP discount Picto, which makes all skills cost 1 less AP, meaning skills like Lightning Dance and especially Heck become way more usable than before. But this effect is actually more beneficial for our next character, Mael, the original nuke of the game, and it's no surprise she's still overpowered. The DLC gave her 2 new fantastic weapons, Eschium and Liquorum. Eschium is the stronger of the 2, being able to output over 1 billion damage with the right setup. But Liquorum is my personal favorite because it fixes the one problem with solo Mael setups, Mark RNG. See, in the past, I've had a bit of trouble landing Mark with Mael's free aim shots, sometimes even wasting an entire turn without getting a single one. And even if I do, multi-hit skills like Burning Canvas often take it away. However, the weapon's level 10 and 20 passives fix that by applying Mark on the first hit, and not removing it on successive hits. And combining this with 2 more Pictos will make Mael's damage skyrocket. Feint applies 4 stacks of the new this thing, which makes a hit of a skill or base attack deal 1 damage. However, the 5th hit, courtesy of the Picto, will deal septuple damage. And then there's Frenzy, which makes each successive hit of a skill deal 10% more damage. And this effect is also Liquorem's level 4 passive, meaning Mael's damage gets this boost twice. And it just so happens she has a skill that's perfect for this setup, Burning Canvas, a skill that has 5 hits and does incrementally more damage per burn stack it applies, with damage capping out at 100 burns. Seeing that Burning Canvas is 5 hits, and pairing this with Gradient Overcharge, Feint, and Frenzy, it can do damage. Given the setup, the two main skills you want are Burning Canvas and Gustav's Homage, as they're her hardest hitting multi-hit options. Also, for Homage specifically, there's another Picto called Double Third, which makes the third hit of a skill deal double damage, meaning the 5th and 6th hits of Homage will deal more damage than the rest of the combo. And finally, before I move on from Mael, I want to quickly bring up AP Discount again, as it gives Mael the most insane thing in the DLC. At least according to me. Last Chance, you know, the skill that drops Mael's HP to 1 but refills her AP and puts her into Virtuoso stance, now costs 0 AP. This means that you can end every single turn with Mael in Virtuoso stance, which has insane utility for battles. And finally is a character who I've grown quite attached to while playing through the game recently. CL. It's only recently I've begun using CL for damage, as I used to just use her for support with Lithesen, if I can speak. But I recently started using Martenon, and the effects were absolutely hilarious. But that will be the topic of my next video. But in this update, I believe I found what is quite possibly her second best DPS weapon, the Dualisson, obtained from beating the Duelists in the Endless Tower. On paper, it seems like a slightly above average base attack weapon with Charnon's Foretell on free aim effect. And at first, I wrote this weapon off since base attack builds aren't really optimal. However, while testing the weapon, I discovered an additional effect that is not listed in the description. Dualisson applies 1 Sun card on free aim shot, and 1 Moon card on base attack. This not only allows for an immediate switch into Twilight, but it also means she can stack Sun cards at the same rate as Martenon, allowing her to get 12 cards in 3 turns so long as she uses Cheater. I also want to point out its level 20 passive. During Twilight, any Foretell consumed is not removed. Now, I have no idea if that means what I think it means, but if you apply 20 Foretell during Twilight, and then use a Moon skill to remove it, you can get that bonus by removing it indefinitely, and building up the Foretell you need for CL's End Slice a lot quicker. Now for skills and Pictos, I want to pay special attention to CL since her setup is the most important. First, give her the 3 highest speed Pictos in the game, one of which being the new one called Trigger Happy, which, look at this description and tell me why it's good for free aim builds. Optimally, she should always go first, and go as often as possible to facilitate support, even though this is a DPS weapon, but that's just how CL rolls. And for skills, Fortune's Fury and Intervention are CL's bread and butter support skills, and are naturally a part of this build. And then there's All Set, which she should always open the battle with to get everyone's buffs up. Then for damaging skills, Marking Card is a staple, guaranteeing mark and being generally cheap. And finally, there's Phantom Blade for a break option, and Dark Wave for AoE Foretell consumption. Although you can sub in Phantom Blade for Twilight Dance to keep the Twilight effect active. That does it for my main team, but I also wanted to quickly go over Minoko and Verso so I have full coverage. Starting with Minoko, his new weapon of choice is Baguettaro, gotten from the Mime in Verso's drafts, which also gives him his much needed baguette outfit. The weapon is essentially Saidaro with a much less strict scaling condition. I like to slot him in as an alternative for Lune, using Chevalier's Ice to apply slow for 3 turns on enemies, which is in addition to the standard Benissuar Mortar, I still can't pronounce that, and Lampmaster's Light combo. Although, I also want to try Duelist Storm and Sakapatop Fire to see how much of a buff they get from Frenzy. Also, hi, Scripting Jeff here with one more important tidbit about this weapon. It does that. And finally, Verso, who despite the new area being named after him, really got the short end of the stick in terms of weapons. His 2 new weapons are pretty bad, to the point where the meta is to still use Saimoso. So just keep doing that. But with that said, that'll do it for the guide. I hope you found it fun, and if you like what you saw here, consider liking, commenting, and subscribing to help build a community, and consider checking out my math series as I'm really excited about it. Until next time, this is Jaffinator, signing off.